Hello everyone, and welcome to Fictional Vortex. So we are back with an interesting series on what if Naruto become a dangerous shinobi in the elemental nations. But before we start, I just want to remind you to please subscribe to my channel and hit the like button if you enjoy my content. Let's start the story. Land of Fire. Konoha 9 years after Kyuubi Naruto ran and ran, out of breath. She looked behind her and scowled at the sizable mob that was chasing her. She turned right and ran. Her eyes widened when she finally realized that she entered an alley. Reaching the end, Naruto leaned up against the wall and hugged herself. The mob entered the alley and smiled at their lucky fortune. Ha! Even the Yondaime from the dead has given us an opportunity. One of them yelled. The crowd cheered in response. One of the men quickly charged at Naruto with a kunai in hand. Naruto yelled out as a response. The man grabbed both her wrists and brought them above her head. Layering both her hands, the man drove the kunai through them with force. Naruto screamed out in pain, tears rolling down her face. The crowd again cheered at the pain they were causing her. Another man with a kunai grabbed her shirt and quickly ripped it apart, leaving her shirtless. Naruto, out of the corner of her eye, saw the glint of the moonlight reflecting off a shiny surface. She turned her head and spotted the headband of Konoha. The ninja scowled at her. The man unsheathed his sword and drove the sword through her chest with such force that it penetrated the wall behind the red-haired girl. She opened her mouth in a silent scream. She coughed up the blood that made its way from her lungs and up her throat. The mob again cheered at her torment. Several of the men leered at her. One of them grunted, slashing his knife at her pants, leaving her now only in her white cotton panties. Naruto closed her eyes in shame. Naruto heard what seemed to be the sound of a zipper and a button. Opening her eyes, they immediately widened in shock. Several of the men leered at her with lust in their eyes, their private place exposed to her. Naruto quickly closed her eyes and accepted her fate. Alleyway. 15 minutes later, Hiruzen Sarutobi cried for the first time in a long time. He had gotten there too late to save the young redhead. Himself and his Anbu arrived at a grisly scene. All of the men had holes in their chests and the alleyway was covered in blood. Hiruzen made his way towards the end of the alley, avoiding the dead bodies. His eyes widened at the scene he had come upon. The redhead Naruto laid there in a small puddle of her own blood and seminal fluids. The young girl's eyes were open, dead and emotionless. I'm so sorry, Naruto, Hiruzen thought sadly. I have failed you, Minato. I couldn't protect her, Hiruzen thought. He snapped his fingers and several Anbu appeared by his side. Inu, Neko. Take young Naruto to the hospital. Tell them to clean her and to treat her wounds. Inu and Neko both nodded. Hiruzen turned and heard a groan. His head snapped to a man that was on the floor with his bat up against the wall. The man had several slash wounds but nothing life-threatening. Hiruzen again snapped his fingers and pointed at the man. Anbu, take him to Ibiki in torture and interrogation. Tell him to find out everything. Tell him to find if anyone else was going to be involved, then have him capture them. We'll schedule a public execution for them. Hi Hokage-sama. Several Anbu replied. They quickly disappeared with the man. Hiruzen sighed and looked up at the sky. I have failed as a Hokage, Minato. I am sorry. Hiruzen sighed. Konoha Hospital. 1 week later, Naruto laid unconscious for a week before she finally woke up. Her vision was met by the only person she has ever cared about in the village. Gigi. She trailed off. Hiruzen's head quickly snapped up to the redhead. Naruto, he replied sadly. Naruto turned her head and looked through the window before turning back to Hiruzen. In a rapid sudden movement, Naruto buried her face into his chest, balling up her fists. I'm sorry, Gigi. I couldn't stop them, she said, crying. They rap. Hiruzen quickly cut her off, softly comforting the small girl. Shish. It's not your fault, Naruto. Naruto, do you what happened to them? They were dead all except one. Naruto shook her head. I don't know. When they started to, she trailed off with small tears in her eyes. I blacked out after the first few. Hiruzen nodded. One of them survived, Naruto. He'll be sent to Ibiki. We'll find out everything, then they'll die, he stated. Naruto nodded in response. Hiruzen stayed silent and continued to comfort the girl that had her face buried in his robes. Naruto, I want to take you on as my student, he said, pulling Naruto away from his chest. He gazed into the soft ocean blue eyes. I know you're already in the academy, but I want to take you on as a student. Like Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade. she asked timidly. Yes. Like them. I don't want what happened to you to ever happen again. Naruto merely nodded. When do we start, Gigi? She asked, looking at him. Hiruzen scratched his chin in thought. Start right away or hold off until her mind heals. When do you want to start, Naruto? He asked her. The young redhead eyed him with determination. Right away. Land of Fire, Konoha 6 months later. Hiruzen eyed Naruto while she trained. She has grown quite fast, he thought happily. Then his mood grew dark. While she has grown, she has also grown to be emotionless. Her eyes are no longer filled with happiness when she's with me. They are cold. Gigi. A voice called out, breaking out of his thoughts. He turned his gaze back to the young girl. Her face shiny due to the sweat that had accumulated. Yes, Naruto? When are you going to teach me actual jutsus? She asked, her cold eyes penetrating his gaze. He knew her coldness didn't mean anything towards him. The coldness had become her default when talking to anyone. The old Hokage scratched his chin before snapping his fingers. What I am going to teach you, Naruto, is a forbidden jutsu that I think will complement you well, he stated with a small smile. The word, forbidden, quickly changed Naruto's face from one of coldness to excitement and curiosity. What is it, Gigi? She asked, her excitement showing. Hiruzen smiled at her enthusiasm. Sometimes, even the old Naruto can make its way through. It's called Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. It's forbidden because it takes a lot of chakra to make a clone, he said. He brought his hands into a hand sign and in a puff of smoke, 2 copies of himself appeared next to him. These clones are different from the regular Bunshin taught at the academy. Those are merely illusions. They cannot attack or talk. These clones are actual solid clones, he explained. To prove his point, he tapped one of the clones and gave it a nod. The clone stepped forward. As you can see, these clones can become very useful. More useful than the regular Bunshin. These can help you in a fight, the clone said. The other clone stepped forward as well. A unique thing with the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is that once the clone has dispelled, the memories and experiences of that clone return to the original user. The original Hiruzen nodded. Both of the clones dispelled in a puff of smoke. This makes it ideal for espionage, but it makes it even more useful for training. It can effectively cut the time down of training by half. Naruto eagerly nodded. Hiruzen waved his arm. Now. Perform the necessary signs, he said. Naruto nodded and copied the hand sign that Hiruzen performed himself. Now, channel chakra and it should work. Naruto did just that. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, she yelled. In a puff of smoke, 25 clones appeared. Hiruzen's eyes widened then went back to its normal state, 10 clones immediately. I knew her chakra was immense, but this would put her above even me. Hiruzen smiled. It would seem your chakra levels are indeed immense as I thought, he said, grabbing Naruto's attention. This is why I thought this jutsu would be appropriate for you. Naruto nodded in response. Thank you, Gigi, she said, her cold eyes transforming to her old happy ones for a mere moment before turning back to icy cold. Hiruzen gave her a smile and nodded. Now come, Naruto, we'll be late for your academy class. Naruto groaned at the mention of the academy but nodded nonetheless and followed the old man. Making their way into the village, Naruto quickly grew emotionless and cold. The villagers grew and grew in numbers while the hateful glares appeared. They would normally shout at the demon, but they held off due to the Hokage traveling with her. Naruto ignored the glares and continued on towards the academy. Finally arriving in front of the building, the both of them made their way through and found their way to Naruto's class. Naruto opened the door and was immediately met by a screeching voice. Naruto. Yurla. She stopped screeching in shock as the Hokage followed Naruto. Most of the class was in shock. Iruka turned towards Naruto and smiled while he bowed his head towards the Hokage. Hiruzen smiled at the class before turning his attention to Iruka. I apologize for the lateness of young Naruto here, she was training with me. Iruka's eyes widened in shock along with the entire class. All had the same thought, the Hokage is training Naruto. Naruto ignored them all and made her way to the back of the class and sat down. Iruka nodded dumbly at the Hokage. Hiruzen nodded by and gave Naruto a look. Naruto nodded to Hiruzen and at last, he left. All right class. Iruka said dumbly, back to what we were discussing. The class groaned. Naruto felt the gaze of several people. She met the gaze of a raven-haired boy, Uchiha Sasuke. The survivor of the Uchiha massacre perpetrated by his brother, Uchiha Itachi. She turned her head to the second gaze and was met by the hateful green eyes of a pink-haired girl, Haruno Sakura. Daughter of Haruno Mebuki, member of the Civilian Council of Konoha. A civilian who shows little promise of being a kunoichi. She met the gaze of the third person, the lustful gaze of a raven-haired boy with red markings on his cheeks. Inuzuka Kiba. Son of Inuzuka Sume, a member of the Shinobi Council of Konoha. Brother of clan heir, Inuzaka Hana, a chunin of Konoha. Shows small promise of being a shinobi. She again turned her head and met the fourth gaze. The pale lavender eyes of the dark blue-haired girl, Hyuga Hanada. Daughter of Hyuga Hiyashi, a member of the Shinobi Council of Konoha. Clan heir of the Hyuga clan. Shows promise of being a strong kunoichi if her timid personality is discarded. Hanada quickly looked away when Naruko met her gaze. Naruko huffed and turned to look out the window. She ignored the voice of Iruka. She had already learned most of what the academy thought from the various scrolls and books that Hiruzen had given her. Her being in the academy was more of a formality at this point. Hokage's office. Hiruzen groaned while he sat in his seat. He had always dreaded doing the paperwork that the Hokage was required to do. He turned his head and looked at the picture of Namikaze Minato, the fourth Hokage. I failed you, Minato. But I am atoning for my failure by teaching your daughter, he thought with a smile that quickly turned into a frown. I fear what she has and will become due to her rape. She is quickly growing into a weapon. He again frowned. Better me teaching her than Danzo. His thoughts were interrupted by an Anbu that appeared and quickly kneeled. Hokage-sama, the council requests your presence, the Anbu said. Hiruzen sighed and massaged his temple. He always dreaded the council, even more so since Naruko was born on the night of the Kyuubi attack. Hiruzen waved his hand and dismissed the man in the mask. He stood and made his way towards the council room. He has an inkling of what this council meeting was about, Naruko. He thought with a frown. He arrived at the set of double doors and entered. He was met by both the Shinobi Council and the Civilian Council. His gaze turned dark at the Civilian Council. They had always hated the young red-headed girl and had always called for the girl to be executed. He sat down at the end of the table in the seat that was typically meant for the Hokage. He sighed and finally spoke. Why have you requested my presence? He asked. A pink-haired member of the Civilian Council quickly shouted. You have been teaching that demon. We demand you stop. The woman quickly shrank under the powerful gaze of Hiruzen. You demand me, the Hokage? He asked in a dark tone. The woman sat down as quickly as she could. One Utatane Kaharu quickly spoke, trying to defuse the situation. Hiruzen. The Hokage scowled at the fake warm tone that his old teammate took. Don't you think it's best to leave the teaching of the girl to her academy instructors? The woman said in a sweet tone. Hiruzen shook his head. I do not. He stated. Kaharu quickly scowled before it disappeared just as quickly. The woman gave Hiruzen a warm smile. But a teacher as powerful as you teaching the girl, some would think you are favoring her, she said, again in that sweet tone. Hiruzen merely shrugged. I do not care. The girl has shown promise and I have decided to teach her, Hiruzen said. Kaharu frowned but nodded nonetheless. Danzo scowled. You should have her transferred under my care. Hiruzen, you are powerful no doubt, but I do think she would grow faster and better under my tutelage. Hiruzen gave him a glare, denied. I will not turn her into some mindless killing weapon under you. Danzo, Hiruzen replied. Danzo again frowned but didn't continue. Hiruzen eyed everyone in the room. Now, anything else? One of the members of the Civilian Council, a dark-haired woman with a pair of black glasses, raised her hand. We request that you take Uchiha Sasuke under your tutelage like you have that young girl, the woman said, quickly correcting her mistake. Hiruzen glared at the woman. I will not. The glasses-wearing council member shook her head. We all know Uchiha-sama holds a lot more promise than that girl. We must please Uchiha-sama as much as we can. He is our last Sharingan user, she stated, smiling when she mentioned Sasuke. I have made my decision and it is final. I will not take him under my tutelage, he yelled out. The woman scowled but nodded. Hiruzen stood up from his chair and waved his hand. This council meeting is over, he stated in a tone that left no room for argument. With Naruto, and with that, our class is at an end, Iruka called out. Naruko immediately got up and started to leave the room. Iruka immediately tried to stop her. I'm not done yet, Naruko, he said. Naruko looked at her teacher coldly. You have ended the class, thus, you are done with it, Naruko stated in a monotone voice. Aruka just nodded dumbly. Naruto left the classroom ignoring all the looks her classmate gave her. She failed to see the boy with the small dog get up and follow her. Naruto left the academy and made her way to the Hokage monument. Kiba followed Naruto as quietly as he could. He had lusted for the girl ever since he had first laid eyes on her on the very first day of the academy. The girl was enthusiastic about the academy whenever he would observe her. She would smile and laugh with Shikamaru and Choji. The red-haired girl would ignore him whenever he tried to talk to her. Then 6 months ago she was out of the academy for a month, then she came back. She was cold and emotionless. She would ignore everyone including her former friends, Shikamaru and Choji. Kiba tried to figure out what happened to Naruto but was always denied anything by his mother. Kiba just ignored it after that and continued to act like he did before Naruto disappeared. Naruto turned left into an alley. Kiba, noticing this, smiled. He followed the girl and his smirk grew even more. "Why are you following me, Kiba-san?" Naruto asked. Kiba's smirk was the same. "I want you, Naruto. You'd make the perfect mate," he said, taking a step forward. Naruto stood still. "No," she replied. Kiba snickered. "It wasn't a question," he replied back, taking more steps towards the girl. Naruto's eyes widened at his tone and implication. Her eyes immediately went back to normal and grew colder than they already were. "You will force me?" Kiba nodded and his smirk grew bigger, thinking she would finally agree with him. Kiba didn't even see what happened. All of a sudden something was piercing his shoulder. He looked at whatever it was and noticed a red hardened substance piercing his shoulder. He followed the material and noticed he came from Naruto's lip. Naruto bit her lip, releasing blood, and pierced it through the boy. She retracted the hardened blood, making it go back to its liquid form, and wiped the blood from her lip. She walked towards the down boy who gripped his shoulder and crouched in front of him. "I suggest you don't force anything upon anyone. Or else I'll do the same thing I just did, but instead of your shoulder, I'll aim for your head." Kiba nodded furiously in fear. Naruto gave the boy a small smile and walked away. Naruto continued to make her way to the monument. After 10 minutes of walking, she sat on the third Hokage's head and looked over the village she hated. Naruto reached into her pouch and took out a kunai. She pierced her index finger and let the blood flow for a few seconds. The blood covered her hand and formed itself into a blood claw. Naruto stared at her blood claw for a few seconds before a sinister smile slowly formed on her face. Land of Fire, Konoha, training ground 12 to 6 months later. Naruto dug into her pouch, pulling out a kunai. She placed the sharp end on her left palm and put pressure on it, breaking the skin. She pulled the kunai upwards, slicing her palm open. She repeated the process on her right palm. Naruto waited a few seconds so the blood could flow. The blood immediately covered the entirety of both her hands, and after a few seconds they transformed into dual blades made of her own blood. The blood hardened and one end of both blades sharpened itself. A dark smirk appeared on the red-haired's face. She eyed the log in front of her before charging. She attacked the log wildly, no kenjutsu stance appearing. All the strikes were random, uncoordinated and rough. A purple-haired Anbu in the distance viewed the red-haired girl with wide eyes. She never knew the girl could manipulate her own blood. She saw the girl wildly attack the log and cringed. Being a kenjutsu user herself and one of the best in all of Konoha, she felt disgusted at the unskilled usage displayed by the girl. Naruto froze in mid-slice before turning her head to a branch of a tree off in the distance. The Anbu froze, then sighed. "No point in hiding now, she's been caught." She shunshined in front of the red-haired girl and smiled behind her Neko mask. Naruto's eyes widened at the woman. She knew that mask. It had always helped her with protection whenever she was around and had offered Naruto food whenever the shop owners would deny her purchasing their food. "Neko-chan," Naruto whispered in shock. Neko raised her hand and waved. "Hello Naru-chan," she replied. Naruto stood there frozen before finally running towards the woman. Naruto enveloped the purple-haired woman in a bone-crushing hug, burying her face in the woman's chest. Neko patted the back of the red-haired's head in a soothing manner, placing her chin on top of Naruto's head. "I've missed you, Neko-chan." Neko smiled behind her mask. "Naru-chan, I want to show you something," Neko whispered. Naruto immediately untangled herself from the woman with a small genuine smile on the emotionless girl's face. Neko reached up to her mask, gripping it with her hand and took it off. Two brown eyes stared at two cerulean blue eyes. Naruto looked at the unmasked woman with shock. My name is Azuki Yugo, Naru-chan, Yugo said. I saw you use your blood manipulation ability. Naruko's genuine smile quickly left her place and was replaced by a cold scowl. Yugo, seeing this, quickly raised up her hands in surrender. It's okay, Naru-chan. I don't view you any different, she quickly got out. Naruko's scowl left her face, but her cold eyes stared at Yugo. I saw your sword technique, Yugo stated. Naruko smiled. Don't smile just yet. Your technique was horrendous. Your moves were obvious. Anyone even remotely trained in kenjutsu would be able to defeat you, Yugo informed the girl. Naruko scowled again and frowned. Yugo smiled at the girl's expression. I want to teach you, Naru-chan. Naruko slowly nodded. Kenjutsu will not be my main focus, Yugo-chan, Naruko spoke. I can make anything with my blood. It's quite a good skill to have. I can use it for defense and offense. Yugo tilted her head in curiosity. Show me, Naruko nodded, grabbing the kunai that she used to slice her palms. She put the sharp end on her left forearm and sliced it. She did the same with her right. Yugo bit her lip in worry. It seems she doesn't feel the pain. That's worrisome. The blood flowed before it floated off Naruko's forearms, then it quickly formed around Naruko and transformed into a sphere. A.N. Just like Gaara's sand dome. Yugo pressed a kunai to the surface of the blood, trying to pierce through it. Yugo sighed after realizing that the blood changed into a rubbery substance. I can't pierce through it. That's good, she commented. The blood dome dissipated and all that was left was her forearms covered entirely in her blood. Naruko nodded towards Yugo. Throw that kunai. Yugo gave her a look and nodded. Taking a few steps back, Yugo threw the kunai with force. Just as it was about to hit the red head, the blood blocked the kunai with quite the speed. Yugo whistled, clearly impressed. Are you controlling that? Naruko nodded. The blood acts as a shield. Anything that's thrown at me, I can block, Naruko answered. And what if dozens of kunai and shuriken are thrown at you? I just form a bigger shield. If it's in multiple directions, then I just block that path as well. If it's from all directions, I just form my blood dome. Yugo nodded in understanding. And do you suffer blood loss from all the blood you're using? Naruko gave Yugo a dark smile. I do not. My dear friend on the inside replenishes it, the redhead answered. Yugo looked at her with a concerned gaze. So she knows of the Kyuubi. I'll have to inform Hokage-sama of this. That's good, Yugo whispered. Naruko, hearing this, nodded. Yugo gave Naruko a smile. Meet me here tomorrow at 7 a.m. and I'll train you in my kenjutsu style. Naruko gave her another nod and returned the smile. Land of Fire. Konoha. Academy. Naruko made her way to the academy, the useless place she disliked. The shinobi and kunoichi standards were lower than in previous years. Most of the people in her class showed little promise. The only person who showed promise to become a shinobi like decades previous was Uchiha Sasuke, the only survivor of the Uchiha massacre. Naruko disliked the boy. He treated everyone as if he was better than one, always demanding that the teacher favor him since he's the last Uchiha. He would claim that any jutsu should be his since he claims he's an Uchiha, an elite. When Naruko heard that, she audibly laughed. The glare she received made her laugh even more. Most of the class looked weirdly at her. They knew that she was always either cold or emotionless. Seeing Naruko laugh was always a creepy and rare sight. Ever since then, the Uchiha and herself were always on cold terms. She could tell the raven-haired boy hated her, to which she didn't honestly care. Naruko knew that she could the boy into submission if she wanted to, but if she were to do that she would have to deal with the dread civilian council. Naruko let out a scowl when she finally made it into the room. Most of the kids whipped their heads around to stare at her before looking away. She ignored most of them and made her way to her seat at the back of the class. After a few minutes of waiting, Iruka made his way into the classroom. With him was a man wearing a bandana with the leaf symbol on it. Naruko scowled even more. She knew that Mizuki hated her for what she carried. The man gave her a scowl right back. All right, class. Today is the day of the graduation exam. Iruka shouted out excitedly. Most of the students cheered at the news. Mizuki gave Naruko a sinister smile before it disappeared. The first part of the exam is the written test. In the second part will be a practical exam. You are required to show us the Bunshin, Henge, and Kawarimi. As Iruka said, the first part of the exam is the written test. Iruka and I will be handing those out now, Mizuki informed them. Naruto scowled as Mizuki made his way towards her, a sinister smile on his face. He placed her exam paper in front of her and continued on to the rest of the students. After a few minutes of handing out the exams, both of the men went back to their desk at the front of the class. All right class, begin. Most of the students quickly started writing down their answers. Naruto looked at her exam paper and audibly growled. She wasn't proficient in genjutsu but she could still sense it. She looked up and glared at Mizuki who just gave her a smile back. Naruto gave him a cold smirk and raised her hand. Yes, Naruto? Iruka-sensei. It seems someone has put a genjutsu on my exam. Mizuki widened his eyes in shock. How the hell did the dead last manage to see the genjutsu? Iruka's face turned into a confused one. Getting up, he walked over to the redhead and saw her paper. He narrowed his eyes and formed his hand into a seal, Kai. The paper shimmered and returned back to its original state. Iruka scratched his head in confusion but went back to his seat. Mizuki gave Naruto a scowl. She replied with her own sinister smirk in return. Examining her new test, Naruto mentally laughed. How pathetic. These questions are way too easy. Has the academy truly fallen this low? Naruto answered the questions. After 10 minutes she was done. Naruto lifted both her legs and placed them on her desk and pulled out a kunai so that she could pick her nails. Mizuki again gave her a scowl at her apparent boasting. After a while, Iruka stood up with a smile on his face. Pencils down. We'll be collecting your exams and move on to the next part, he announced. Most of the kids nodded and shuffled out of the seats to leave the room. She followed the group. Naruto leaned up against a wall and continued to pick at her nails with her kunai. For 30 minutes Naruto watched kids go in then come out with their new leaf headband. Uzumaki Naruto. Iruka called out. Naruto shuffled her way into the empty room and eyed both of her instructors. Iruka gave her a smile before motioning with his hand. Alright. You'll be performing the Bunshin, Henge, and Kawarimi. Naruto nodded in response. She formed the seals and hanged into Hiruzen Sarutobi. As a hanged third Hokage, she gave Iruka a look that made him gulp. He nodded slowly, motioning to continue. In a puff of smoke, she returned back to her normal self. Alright. Now Kawarimi. Naruto formed the 5 seals and in a puff of smoke, a chair appeared in her place. Iruka nodded and smiled. Naruto disappeared in a puff of smoke replacing the chair. And now the Bunshin, Iruka said. Naruto gave her sensei a look but shook her head. Unfortunately, my chakra does not allow me to form a Bunshin. Would the Kage Bunshin no Jutsu be an acceptable replacement? Iruka's eyes widened in shock. An academy student being able to perform Kage Bunshin. The dead last at that. Mizuki frowned. Iruka. She needs to specifically perform the Bunshin. We can't make exceptions, the man lied, hoping Iruka agreed with him so that the demon would fail. Iruka scratched his chin and shook his head. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu is a good replacement. An academy student being able to perform a kinjutsu? That alone would graduate you. Mizuki frowned again but nonetheless nodded. Naruto gave Iruka a nod and performed the seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, Naruto shouted. 2 puffs of smoke appeared at either side of Naruto and 2 exact copies of the girl appeared. Well done, Naruto. Iruka said, clapping his hands together in congratulations. The 2 clones disappeared in a puff of smoke. Naruto walked up to the desk, reaching her hand out to grab her newly gained headband. Iruka gladly handed it over to the girl. Naruto walked out of the room while tying the headband around her biceps. Most of the students looked at the red-headed girl in shock. How did the dead last pass? Did our instructors pity her? She probably told the Hokage to let her pass. Yeah, no way she has the skill to pass. Naruto ignored all of them, walking up to her previous spot that she occupied before she was called. Both Iruka and Mizuki came out of the room. Iruka looked at his clipboard then back up at the students. Alright. Come back tomorrow at 7:30 a.m. for team placements. I would also like to announce something else. Rookie of the Year is Uchiha Sasuke while Kunoichi of the Year is Haruno Sakura. Most of the kids cheered, excited to have finally passed the graduation exam. Naruto shook her head. Swirls of blood surrounded her before she disappeared from the spot she was in. Mizuki looked at the now empty spot in shock. She even knows Shunshin. Iruka himself looked shocked before his expression was replaced by a smile. Land of Fire. Konoha Academy. Naruto woke up the sound of her alarm. She groaned but tapped the small button on top of the device, silencing it. The morning sunlight peered through the window directly into her eyes. She groaned for the second time before finally getting up from the bed. She dragged herself to the bathroom and quickly brushed her teeth. After a few minutes of that, the redhead went back to her room and sighed. She laid her clothes for the day of graduation. Red sports bra, red panties, black anbu pants, black anbu sandals, red anbu forearm guards, and her black one-sleeved collared vest. Finally dressed, Naruto wrapped her kunai and shuriken holster around her right thigh and wrapped her newly acquired Konoha headband around her left bicep. Finally finished, she left her apartment, making sure to lock the door. Naruto made her way through the village towards the academy. She ignored all the hate-filled glares that she had been accustomed to for most of her life, but she heard them whisper. The demon became a kunoichi. How could the Hokage allow this? The Yondaime must be rolling in his grave at such a disappointment. The demon whore probably fucked her instructors. Probably the only way she even became a kunoichi. Naruto clenched her fists in anger. She bit her lip and sent a blood spike straight at the villager that made that comment. The man screamed in pain, collapsing while gripping his bleeding shoulder. The villagers looked shocked. Most of them gathered around the villager trying to help the now injured man. Naruto ignored the rest of them and made her way to the academy. She saw the building up ahead and scowled at the sight. Most of the clan heads along with the parents of any civilian children were there to congratulate them. Naruto stood off in the distance, seeing the large gathering with longing eyes, wanting to know who her own parents are. Naru-chan, someone said, interrupting Naruto from her thoughts. She recognized that voice, Neko-chan. Naruto greeted with a small smile. Yugo returned the smile and spotted the red Konoha armband. Seems you're now a fully fledged genin, Naru-chan, Yugo warmly stated. The purple-haired woman stepped towards the young girl and wrapped her in a hug. I'm proud of you, Naruto. Some of the civilian parents looked at the scene with disgust, muttering something about demon lover. Yugo unwrapped herself, placing both her hands on Naruto's shoulders. Naruto looked at the older woman with wide eyes. Yugo leaned in and placed a small kiss on the young girl's forehead. Yugo pulled back with a smile. Thank you, Yu-chan. Naruto let out in genuine warmth. Yugo turned her head and looked at the diminishing crowd, then turned back to Naruto. It seems our time is up. Naruto nodded her head sadly. Don't look so sad, Naruto, it's not like as if I'm disappearing. Naruto nodded. She bit her lip, turning her head towards the small crowd then back to the older woman. Naruto gave the woman a quick hug before running off towards the academy entrance. Yugo had a big smile on her face. Naruto was never one to initiate their hugs, it was always herself. It seems Hokage-sama and I are the only ones to see her warm heart amongst the cold, no matter how small, she thought. Yugo let out another smile before finally disappearing in a puff of smoke. Inside the academy, Naruto sat in her usual seat at the back of the class waiting for the instructors to make their way into the room. The redhead looked around the room, noticing all the genins from her class managed to pass. Uchiha Sasuke was looking at her with a curious gaze while Sakura and Ino seeing this glared at Naruto in hate. She ignored the three of them while picking at her nails with a kunai. The door to the classroom slammed open and Iruka came into the room, a nervous look on his face. The man made his way to the center of the class and looked at his clipboard. I apologize, Mizuki couldn't make to outside circumstances. I'll be the only one here instead. Most of the class looked confused while Naruto had a dark smirk growing on her face. Flashback. Last night, so, Mizuki is going to steal the Forbidden Scroll, Gigi? Naruto asked. The old Hokage nodded his head, taking a puff out of his pipe. That's right. Our information network has reported that Mizuki will attempt to steal the scroll. I would like you to stop him. Naruto nodded slowly. This will be your first official mission as a genin of Konoha. It will be classified as an A rank. Do you accept? Naruto bowed her head. Hi, Hokage-sama, she responded. Hiruzen smiled at her professionalism. Hiruzen reached into his desk and pulled out a small scroll. He tossed it toward the girl. Naruto looked confused. That is the location where Mizuki will stop to look at the scroll. You will stop him there. Naruto nodded her head. She opened the scroll and took in the information that was drawn on the small scroll. After a few seconds, she closed the scroll, placing it in her back pouch. I'll leave at once, Hokage-sama, Naruto stated. Hiruzen nodded and waved his hand in dismissal. Red swirls of blood enveloped the red head. Hiruzen took another puff of smoke and stared at the empty spot before turning his head and looked at the picture of Namikaze Minato. I know I have failed her, but I am still redeeming myself. I hope you and Kushina will forgive me for what I had failed to stop. Hiruzen thought with a sad frown. Naruto reappeared at the location that the map on the scroll provided. She viewed the area before finding a good branch to perch herself on. After 2 hours of waiting on the tree branch, the former instructor suddenly appearing in the clearing. The man made his way to the small shock. He eyed the scroll, reaching for the start of it and slowly unwrapped it. Naruto scowled at the man and jumped down from her vantage point. Mizuki, hearing the sudden sound, looked up and frowned. Uzumaki Naruto, the man said with disgust, I have always hated you. Naruto frowned but shrugged her shoulders. I could tell, traitor. Mizuki scowled at the end before a sinister smile formed on his face. I heard about your rape, he stated. Naruto's frown deepened. Mizuki smiled at the reaction. If only those men didn't die. I would have loved to see them break you mentally and physically. Some would even say you deserved it. Naruto growled at his statement. Naruto sliced the palm of her hand and let the blood flow. Mizuki's eyes widened. How the hell did she get a kunai that fast? You shouldn't have said that. A dark voice resonated from the red-haired girl. Mizuki looked at the girl. Her once cerulean blue eyes were now blood red with slitted pupils. Several blood spikes erupted from the outstretched hand of the young girl. Mizuki's eyes widened in further. He tried to dodge them, but some managed to pierce him. Naruto growled again. She sliced her other hand and formed a blood wall in front of her. Mizuki tiled his head in confusion before his eyes again widened in shock. The blood wall suddenly launched dozens upon dozens of blood spikes at the former Konoha nin. Mizuki would have dodged them if they weren't coming at him at such a fast speed. The man collapsed onto the ground in pain. Naruto slowly walked to man before crouching in front of him. A hardened blood knife appearing in her hand. I will enjoy torturing you and cutting you into little pieces. Iruka jumped into the clearing and viewed the scene in front of him. The place was a mess, most of it contained massive blood spatters. In front of a run-down shack was the mutilated body of Mizuki, and in front of him was a blood-soaked Uzumaki Naruto. A dark sinister smile on her face and a look of glee in her eyes. What happened? Iruka stuttered. Naruto shrugged her shoulders. I cut up a little traitor as ordered. Naruto responded with another smile. Iruka knew something was wrong with the young girl, but he never imagined that it would manifest like this. Naruto looked at the man with her trademark dark smile. I sadly must go. Hokage-sama expects my report. The young girl disappeared in a blood swirl while Iruka looked at the scene with a shocked expression. Flashback end. Alright. The placements are as follows: Team 1, Team 2, Team 3, Team 4, Team 5, Team 6, Team 7 will be Uchiha Sasuke. AHN was heard from the raven-haired boy. Haruno Sakura. An excited squeal resounded throughout the class. I'm with Sasuke-kun. Take that Ino pig. Sakura shouted at the blonde. And Uzumaki Naruto. Your Jonin-sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. What? Why do I get paired with Naruto Baka? Sakura yelled. Iruka displayed a sweat drop. Hokage-sama is the one that chose the team placements. The man trailed off. Sakura huffed before sitting down, a scarlet blush appearing on the girl's face, thinking up ways of spending time with her, Sasuke-kun. Team 8 will be Aburame Shino, Hyuga Hinata, and Inazuka Kiba. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kurenai Yuhi. Team 9 is still in circulation. Team 10 will be Yamanaka Ino, Nara Shikamaru, and Akamichi Choji. Your Junin-sensei will be Sarutobi Asuma. A low, troublesome, was heard by most of the class, which prompted Ino to yell at the lazy boy. Iruka coughed, getting the attention of the class. Your Jonin-senseis will be here shortly. Congratulations on making genin. The man said, congratulating the newly graduated genin. Shortly after he left, a scruffy-looking man with a cigarette dangling from his lips leaned in from the doorway. Team 10, you're with me. Ino Shika Cho quickly followed their new sensei excitedly. Shortly after that, Naruto eyed a black-haired woman in a white and red bandage dress. The striking red eyes caught the staring cerulean blue before the woman looked away. Team 8, with me. Naruto eyed the woman leaving with her new team. She's beautiful, those red eyes are gorgeous, the girl thought. Naruko sat there and stared out the window. 10 minutes passed before she looked at the door. Then an hour passed and Naruko was getting impatient. 3 minutes passed and finally, the door opened revealing a masked man with gravity-defying silver hair and his handband covering one eye. A blood spike embedded itself in the wall next to the silver-haired man. He turned his head and eyed the redhead. He noted the trail of blood making its way down the girl's chin. A blood manipulation user, interesting. Meet me on the roof. The man said before disappearing. That idiot. Making us wait for nearly 2 hours. Sakura screeched. Naruko scowled. A blood-red swirl enveloped her, making her disappear. Sasuke eyed the spot that Naruko was in before grunting. Rooftop Naruko appeared on the rooftop in a blood swirl. She spied the silver-haired man reading an orange-colored book on the ledge of the building. The man looked above his book and spotted the girl. So, you know Shunshin, the man stated with an eye smile. Naruko nodded. She made her way to a step on the roof and sat down. After 10 minutes, Sasuke and Sakura finally arrived. Sasuke sat away from Naruko while Sakura sat next to him. So, tell me about yourselves. Kakashi said plainly, what are your likes, dislikes, hobbies, dreams for the future? You're our sensei, you start first. Sakura shouted. Kakashi merely gave the girl an eye smile. My name is Hitaki Kakashi. I have no intention of telling you my likes or dislikes, my hobbies are none of your business and my dream. Kakashi finished with another eye smile. All you told was your name. Sakura yelled, annoyed. Cherry Blossom Girl, your turn. My name is Haruno Sakura. What I like is, she looked over at Sasuke and blushed. My hobbies are, she looked over to Sasuke, blushed again with a dreamy look to her eyes. And my dream for the future, she looked over at Sasuke, letting out a loud squeal along with a blush. Kakashi eyed the girl with a frown, a fangirl. Great. He sighed to himself. What are your dislikes? Naruko Baka. The pink-haired girl screeched. Naruko visibly winced at the scream while Kakashi frowned again. He turned to look over at Sasuke. Alright broody one, you're next. Sasuke scowled at his new sensei's remark but otherwise answered the man. My name is Uchiha Sasuke. I don't particularly like anything, and I dislike many things. What I have is not a dream, because I will make it into a reality. I'm going to restore my clan, and kill a certain man. Sasuke-kun. Sakura squealed at his introduction. Kakashi merely stared at the boy. An avenger. Hopefully, he'll turn away from his path. Alright, Habanero, you're next. Naruko's eye twitched at that nickname but didn't rise up to take the bait. My name is Uzumaki Naruko. My likes, Yu-Gi-Oh and Hiruzen, she stated in a monotone, emotionless voice. My dislikes are this pathetic excuse for a village. My hobbies, playing with blood, she stated. Sakura looked disgusted while Sasuke looked intrigued. Kakashi merely frowned again underneath his mask. My dream. To meet the person who caused my life such pain and suffering and torture him slowly and carefully. I want the person to experience the pain that that person inflicted upon me. Then I will kill him. Kakashi stared at the emotionless girl with another frown. So. An emotionless, psychotic, blood-loving killing machine. A fangirl. And an avenger. Kakashi let out a sigh. Good. He let out, ignoring the thoughts that were in his head. Tomorrow we'll be conducting our very first mission as a team. What kind of mission? Sakura asked, looking over at Sasuke wanting to impress him with her skill. Are we fight some ninja? Maybe some bandits? Shut up, Sakura, Naruko said in a low monotone voice. Sakura quickly turned her head and glared at the girl. Why don't you shut up, you stupid idiot? Kakashi stood in front of him with a confused expression. I really am cursed. Our first mission is a survival exercise. What kind? Sasuke immediately asked. A survival exercise to become genin, of course. Kakashi said out loud with another eye smile. But, we're already genin, aren't we? Sakura asked, her head tilted in confusion. Naruko merely sighed. He's going to give us a test involving bells. It'll only be 2. We have to manage to take it from him. Whoever doesn't have a bell will get sent back to the academy, she stated. Kakashi looked at the girl with a serious expression. Who told you that? A little birdie told me, she replied. Kakashi's only visible eye twitched. Sakura brought her first in front of her in confidence. I suggest you keep that mouth of yours closed. I'll gladly stitch it up with my blood if you want to. Naruko glared, a psychotic smile on her face. Sakura's eyes widened at the dark tone that was directed at her. Killing intent swiftly engulfed the area. Sweat started forming on Sakura's brow before she quickly nodded at the red-headed girl. It seems she can also direct her killing intent. She is no normal genin. Kakashi thought. He clapped his hands together, breaking his two students and the brooder out of their thoughts. Meet me tomorrow at 7 a.m. by Training Ground 7. Team 7 nodded in unison. Just as he was about to leave, Kakashi turned his head toward his new team. Oh, and don't eat any breakfast. Why? Sakura asked. You'll only throw it up. The silver-haired Jonin replied with an eye smile. Sakura gulped while Sasuke looked off into the distance. Kakashi gave them a mock salute before disappearing in a puff of smoke. Naruko scowled before she herself disappeared in a blood swirl, leaving her new teammates to their own devices. Naruko reappeared at Training Ground 12 for her usual training session with Yugo. Searching the area for a few seconds, she spotted the purple-haired woman. Yugo spotted the girl and gave her a smile. Naruko ran up to the woman and gave her a hug. Thank you for being there, Yu-chan, Naruko said softly into Yugo's chest. Yugo ran her hand through Naruko's soft red hair gently. Of course I would, I love you, Naru-chan, Yugo replied. Naruko responded by snuggling more into the woman's chest with a small warm smile. Land of Fire. Konoha Naruko sat down on the bridge and leaned on one of the pillars. Before she could even take out a kunai to pick her nails, a loud screeching voice burst her eardrums. You're almost 3 hours late. Sakura screeched, her hands clenched into fists, ready to hit the Naruko. The redhead shook her head. If you had any information on our sensei you would understand why I came almost 3 hours late, Naruko stated with her eyes closed. Before Sakura could even reply, Kakashi arrived in a puff of smoke giving his new genin team his signature eye smile. Hello, my little Jenny, you're late. Sakura screamed. Kakashi scratched the back of his neck. You see, I saw a cat stuck in a tree so I had to get it down. Then I helped an elderly lady with her groceries but we both got lost on the road of life. Naruko snickered, your excuses are getting worse and worse. Might as well make up an excuse involving your porn book. Kakashi looked at Naruko with a serious look. Who told you about my book? A little birdie, Naruko replied. Send me one of those books, Naruko told the man. Kakashi gave his student a look before letting out a sigh. The silver-haired man crossed his arms. All right. Let's get ahead and move to Training Ground 7. After about 2 minutes of walking, the 4-man team arrived. Kakashi reached behind his back and pulled out 2 bells. If you take these 2 bells from me, you officially become genin, he stated. Sakura gave her teacher a confused look, but, aren't we already genin? No, whoever manages to grab the bells pass. Whoever is left with no bell gets sent to the academy. Sakura and Sasuke both nodded while Naruko stared off into the distance looking bored. Kakashi eyed all his students and let a gaze linger on Naruko, and, begin. Kakashi yelled. Sakura ran into the forest rather slowly while Naruko disappeared in a red swirl. Sasuke stayed in his position looking at Kakashi. You didn't hide. Sasuke grunted. I'm an Uchiha, an elite. I don't need to hide, he replied. Kakashi mentally shook his head. He let out a sigh before getting into his stance. Then come and get a bell. Sasuke sneered at Kakashi before charging at his teacher. Sasuke threw punches and kicks only for all of them to be blocked or dodged by the Jonin. Sasuke took several large steps back, glaring at his sensei. Kakashi merely replied with his signature eye smile. My, your taijutsu is definitely good, Kakashi stated. Sasuke again sneered before quickly going through several hand signs. Kakashi eyed the signs, his eyes widening in shock. What? That jutsu shouldn't be known by a genin. Kaden. Gukakyu no Jutsu, Fire Style, Fireball Jutsu. Sasuke took a large breath and released it through 2 fingers. Fire erupted from his lips, a huge fireball quickly hurling at Kakashi. Kakashi stealthily created a shadow clone and switched places with it. The fireball engulfed the fake Kakashi. The clone let out a scream before the area grew silent. Not so strong as an elite, Sasuke stated arrogantly. He walked to the small burned crater spotting Kakashi in the middle, singed to a crisp. Sasuke smiled arrogantly for a few seconds before the clone disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sasuke's onyx eyes widened in shock. The raven-haired Uchiha felt a cold sharp point touching the back of his neck. Sasuke. A fireball jutsu from a genin is indeed impressive, the Jonin commented. Sasuke growled at the condescending tone. Kakashi's eyes smiled knowing that Sasuke had lost. A red hardened substance flew through the air at a rapid pace. Kakashi, sensing this, removed his kunai from the back of Sasuke's neck and quickly blocked the sharp red object. Off in the distance, the silver-haired man spotted Naruto with blood dripping from a cut on her hand. So I was right. Blood manipulation. Naruto raised her hand and fired more spikes, to which Kakashi again blocked with his kunai. A blood wall formed in front of the young girl. What is she planning? Before he could finish his thought, dozens of blood spikes erupted from the wall and launched themselves toward the Jonin. Kakashi pushed Sasuke away from the incoming spikes. Doden. Doryuheki. Doden. Mud wall. An earth wall quickly made its way from the ground and blocked Kakashi's view of Naruto. All of the blood spikes embedded themselves in the wall. Smoke surrounded the area. Suddenly, Kakashi felt a presence to his right. About to attack, all he saw was a kunai. Before he could react, Naruto appeared on his left side. Sweden. Mizu no Dongan. Water style, water bullets. Naruto brought her fingers to her lips and water formed around her lips. Water bullets quickly made their way towards the silver-haired Jonin. Kakashi's eyes widened. She can form water out of thin air. Such master over Sweden. The Jonin thought. The water bullets hit the man, but his body formed into lightning. Kakashi appeared behind the girl, a kunai in hand. He placed the kunai at the base of the redhead's neck. Naruto scowled. You lose, little genin, Kakashi stated with an eye smile. Naruto's scowl turned into a psychotic smile. Blood poured from her hand and quickly encased the Jonin, quickly hardening. Kakashi tried to release himself before sighing. Naruto got behind the man and punched the hard blood. Several cracks appeared before collapsing. In the newly made opening, Naruto eyed the bells. Grabbing it with a smile, she snapped her fingers. The blood softened and turned into dust. Sasuke teased from his spot and Sakura walked out from the trees with a smile on her face. The pink-haired girl quickly made her way to Sasuke. We pass. Sakura yelled excitedly. We didn't, Naruto's voice rang out, breaking Sakura from her thoughts. The pink-haired girl looked at Naruto confusedly. What do you mean? The girl asked. Naruto shook her head with a scowl. The whole purpose of this test is teamwork. We didn't do that, she explained. Kakashi looked at the girl with his patented eye smile. Then why did you get the bell yourself without the help from your teammates? Naruto snickered. They would only drag me down. I am much stronger than the both of them combined, Naruto replied. Sasuke sneered at the girl and Sakura balled fists in anger. The girl raised her fists intending to hit the girl. You're not stronger than Sasuke. Stop trying to be cool, Naruto baka. Sakura screamed. Before her fist could hit Naruto, a red substance wrapped around Sakura's arm. The blood dripped down to the ground, then hardened, trapping the arm in place. Naruto looked at the girl with a bone-chilling smile. Were you going to hit me, Sakura-chan? Naruto whispered coldly. A spot on the hardened blood softened, a blood spike slowly making its way to the neck of Sakura. Stop it, Naruto, Kakashi yelled. Naruto broke out of her trance and nodded. The blood turned into dust, releasing the arm of Sakura. Kakashi eyed his three students and sighed. You fail, the man stated. What? Sakura screeched. As Naruto said, this was a test of teamwork and you failed. Sasuke, instead of hiding with your team and maybe try to form a plan with each other, you fought me head on by yourself. Sakura, all you did was hide. Naruto, after I beat Sasuke you took matters into your own hands and got the bells. You could have found Sakura and find a way to get Sasuke. Naruto teased. Sakura would have only slowed me down. She is the literal definition of dead weight. Don't talk about your teammates that way, Naruto, Kakashi ordered. Naruto merely ignored the man and gave her 2 bells to her useless teammates. Kakashi, seeing, gave the girl an eye smile. Why did you give them the bells? I can just as easily become genin if I wanted to. They cannot. Kakashi looked at the girl and slowly nodded. You all pass. Sakura looked at the man. But you just said we failed. Kakashi gave another eye smile. Naruko gave you her 2 bells because she sees that she pass without the bells. She saw the value of the 2 of you despite saying otherwise, he said, looking at the red head. Naruko scowled, looking away. Meet me at the bridge at 8 a.m. tomorrow for your first official mission. Sasuke's head snapped up in interest. Sakura was visibly excited while Naruko looked off into the distance, disinterested. Land of Fire. Konoha. Hokage Office Hatake Kakashi, Yuhi Kurenai, Sarutobi Asuma, and the other Jonin instructors were currently present in front of the most powerful person in all of Konoha, the Hokage. Sarutobi Hiruzen sat behind his desk with several folders with papers in front of him, seeing the reports of the various Jonins on the recent graduating class. Team 1, pass. Team 2, pass. Team 3, pass. Team 4, pass. Team 5, pass. Team 6, pass. A scruffy bearded man smoking a cigarette stepped up. Team Ino Shikacho, pass. Ino has a fangirl attitude which needs to be broken. Shikamaru, although lazy, becomes a ninja when push comes to shove. He'll truly be one of Konoha's best strategists when he matures. Choji has potential but at the moment he needs some work. A beautiful red-eyed raven-haired woman in a bandage dress stepped forward. Team 8, pass. Kiba has potential but he's quite arrogant which stifles his improvement. Shino is quite reserved but he's definitely the strongest in the group. Hinata is, she's really shy. She has massive potential but like Kiba, her shyness is in the way on her road to become a better kunoichi. A silver-haired man stepped forward and coughed. Team 7, pass. Most of the Jonins in the room stood there shocked. Even Asuma's cigarette dropped from his mouth. Kurenai looked at the Jonin in shock. You really passed them? The woman asked, shocked. Kakashi just eyes smiled at the woman. I have indeed. Sakura is the definition of a fangirl. She isn't even at genin level. For her to grow, that fangirl mentality needs to be shattered. Sasuke, his personality is that of an avenger. His sole purpose is to kill his brother. Hokage-sama. I suggest he be watched, the man stated. Hiruzen looked at Kakashi and nodded. Naruko, she's unique. The girl has, what I believe to be a Kekkei Genkai. Several of the Jonin in the room looked at Kakashi again in shock. Asuma looked at the man. What is it? Kakashi gave an eye smile. The ability to control her own blood, he replied. Some Jonin in the room looked disgusted while some looked intrigued. Hiruzen sat there with worry on his face. He had managed to keep the secret of Naruko's unique ability under wraps but now that several of the Jonin knew, that would mean that both councils of Konoha will know which only gave him a headache. Her control is amazing. She first needs to cut herself to be able to use it which would suggest that she has a high pain tolerance. She doesn't react when she does cut herself which is a little bit worrying about her mentality. She emotionless and cold, she doesn't care for her teammates and sees them as dead weight. She's easily low Chunin to mid Chunin level just based on her Kekkei Genkai alone. Most of the Jonin in the room stood there shocked at what Kakashi had said. The Hokage said but nodded his head. Dismissed, the shinobis and kunoichis in the room nodded at the old man and made their way out of their room. Kakashi, stay behind. Will Naruko be a future threat to the village? Kakashi scratched his chin. At this point, I don't know. She does have people she loves. One of them being Azuki Yugo. Like I said, the girl is cold and emotionless, she doesn't care for her teammates. That's concerning. What will she do when one of her teammates' lives are on the line? The silver-haired Jonin responded. Hiruzen sighed and nodded. He knew that Naruko would be a wild-card kunoichi. Hiruzen then groaned. He could already see what the council would say. Thank you, Kakashi. You are dismissed, the old man stated, waving his hand dismissively. Kakashi nodded his head and left the room. Hiruzen brought his pipe and took a puff, thinking of the past and the future. The old man turned his head and eyed Minato's picture. Hopefully, your daughter comes to love the village like I do, but I don't see that happening with the way the villagers are towards her. If you were alive, would you forgive me, Minato? Land of Fire. Konoha. Yugo's apartment. Naruko sat on her friend's couch while looking off into the distance. Yugo was waiting for a friend that she wanted to introduce to Naruko. Secretly, Yugo hoped that Naruko could take a liking to her friend and maybe add to the list of Naruko's precious people. A knock at the door broke the purple-haired woman out of her thoughts. Yugo quickly stood up from her kitchen chair. Walking towards the door, a smile was already placed on her face. The woman opened the door and was met with the piercing red eyes of Yuhi Kurenai. Kurenai. Yugo squealed. Kurenai returned the smile and hugged her friend. After a few seconds, both of them broke the hug. The raven-haired woman walked into the familiar apartment. After a few seconds, she noticed the girl sitting on the couch, her red hair sticking out like a sore thumb. Naruko turned her head and offered a small smile towards Kurenai. "Red eyes lady," Naruko said. A smile formed on Kurenai's face. Yugo laughed. "Naruko. This is Yuhi Kurenai. Kurenai, this is Uzumaki Naruko," Yugo said, introducing the two females. Kurenai gave Naruko a smile and a nod. "I've seen her. She's the Jonin sensei of Team 8. Your eyes are beautiful," the red-haired girl stated. Kurenai looked at Yugo with a smile. "A flatterer," she said. Yugo just shrugged in response. Kurenai shook her head and finally took a seat on the couch next to the one that Naruko sat in. "How are you, Naruko?" Kurenai asked. "Fine. My team is mostly useless. Thank you for telling me about Kakashi, Yugo," Naruko responded with a shrug. Yugo nodded her head. "You're welcome. I know how that pervert can be," Kurenai growled at that. Naruko. "If you really want to hurt the pervert, burn his book," Kurenai told the girl. Naruko tiled her head but nodded. "He holds his books dear?" The redhead asked. Both Jonins quickly nodded their head. "I will do that then," Naruko said. Kurenai looked at Yugo in confusion. "So, why did you want to introduce me to Naruko, Yugo?" "I wanted Naruko to have more friends. She only has me and Hokage-sama," Yugo responded. Kurenai's eyes widened at that. "You're friends with Hokage-sama, Naruko?" The red-eyed woman asked incredulously. Naruko nodded. "He tried to save me when..." Naruko trailed off, turning her head from both women. "When?" Kurenai asked, trying to get Naruko to continue. Yugo, knowing what had happened to the young girl, quickly intervened. "Something happened to Naruko, Kurenai. She doesn't talk about it," Yugo said. Kurenai slowly nodded. "What happened to her?" Kurenai thought. "After that, he took me on as his student and has been teaching me ever since whenever he has the time to." "So, you're friends with the Hokage and you're his student," Kurenai repeated. Naruko nodded. "Like the Sannin?" Naruko again nodded, confirming Kurenai's question. "You must be quite special then, Naruko," the raven-haired woman stated. Naruko tilted her head at the woman in curiosity. "He has only ever taught 3 people. Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade. And that was a very long time ago. He hasn't taught anyone ever since. That makes you quite special." Naruko's mouth formed into an O and nodded. "It would seem so then," the young girl responded. "He says that I'm the best out of my entire graduating class." This time, Kurenai looked at the girl in confusion. "Your scores would suggest that you were the dead last." "Deception is a ninja's best tool," the young girl merely responded. "Ah. So you were faking. Why?" Naruko looked away from the woman. "I don't know. At first, I wasn't really good until the Hokage took me on as his student. I leapfrogged the entire class, but I didn't want to show my abilities to the academy." Yugo looked at the girl with a small smirk. "Show her your special ability," Yugo suggested. Naruko looked at the woman with suspicion. Kurenai saw this look and smiled at the girl. "Don't worry, Naruko. I already know about your ability to control blood." "Th's time." Naruko looked at Kurenai with even more suspicion. Kurenai again saw this look and quickly brought her hands up in defeat. "Kakashi said you had that ability in his report to Hokage-sama. So, most of the Jonin know of my ability?" Naruko asked. Kurenai nodded in response. This merely made Naruko tisk. "Then that would mean that the council will know about it," she added. Kurenai looked at the young girl, then at Yugo. "Kurenai. The Shinobi Council, some don't like me. The Civilian Council in its entirety despise me. The 3 elders even more." "Why?" Kurenai asked. "For what I hold inside of me," the girl responded. Kurenai's eyes widened in response. "Of course. How could I forget about the Kyuubi? The elders, particularly Shimura Danzo, want to turn me into a weapon in service of Konoha." Kurenai looked at the girl in shock. She knew of the 3 elders, but she didn't see them often, only at important meetings concerning Konoha. Even she knew that Danzo was a warhawk, but she didn't know that he wanted to turn such a young girl into a weapon. "The Hokage has shielded me from his influence," the redhead said. I will never let the man get a hold of me. There will come a day when the Hokage will no longer be alive. I think on that day is when Danzo will strike to get me. Both Kurenai and Yugo looked at Naruto with shock. Naruto merely continued. Even if it means that I have to die so that he can never get his hand on me, so be it. You can't be serious, Naruto. Yugo yelled. Naruto shook her head. Yu-chan, Danzo may have been a former Konoha nin and he may have Konoha's best interest in his heart, his interest is twisted. He wants to make Konoha the strongest by way of war, and to do that he wants me. He needs me for his plans. Kurenai looked at Naruto. How do you know all this? He once visited me when I was little. He told me that he saw great potential in me and that if I ever wanted to realize that true potential to seek him out. Naruto responded. The Hokage has also told me a bit of the man. I'm not gonna let anything happen to you, Naruto, Yugo stated with conviction. Naruto offered the purple-haired woman a rare beaming smile. Thank you, Yu-chan, Naruto replied. Kurenai looked at the duo, a smile forming on her face. These two really do love each other. If Naruto needs me to be there to protect her from Danzo, then I will be there. Kurenai thought, determined. Naruto and Yugo both fell into some small chatter between the two of them. Hopefully, Naruto opens up to me. Hopefully, what Danzo wants will never come to fruition. Naruto tilted her head down and observed the orange cat that was apparently the demon of Konoha. She snorted at the joke. Habanero, reporting in, she whispered. She hated the nickname that Kakashi had picked out for her. Cherry Blossoms, reporting. Raven, reporting. Good. Habanero, status report. Naruto sighed at the nickname. Tora is within view, do I engage? She asked. In the background static noise, she heard a snicker which she assumed belonged to Sasuke. Affirmative. Naruto jumped down from her tree and slowly approached the cat. Tora sniffed at a few leaves that were on the group and swiped at the few that were being blown by the wind. Naruto didn't know why this cat would always run away from its owner to make it famous among the shinobi and kunoichi of Konoha. Naruto slowly walked forward with her hands raised as a sign that she wasn't going to hurt the orange cat. Tora swiftly spotted the red-haired, batting her teeth, it hissed. Naruto ignored three obviously sign of feeling threatened and continued to walk forward with her hands raised. Tora slowly stopped hiding, then told its head curiosity. She put on a fake smile to appease the cat and let him know that she wasn't a danger to it. Tora let out a meow and approached the young Uzumaki. It rubbed its body against her leg while it purred. Naruto reached down and slowly ran her hand through the cat's fur while it purred. This only made Tora purr even more. After few seconds of this, Tora jumped up Naruto's leg, which made red-haired Kunoichi extend her hands to catch the orange cat. You're not so bad, little guy, Naruto whispered as she slowly pet the cat in her hands. Then a young girl brought up her right index finger to her ear and tapped it. Habanero reporting in. Tora has been caught. As soon as she said those words, Kakashi, Sasuke, and Sakura appeared in a blur and made their way towards her. The orange cat in her hands hissed at the approaching trip, but Naruto continued to run her hand through the cat's fur and whispered sweet things to it. It's okay, Tora. I won't let them hurt you, whispered Naruto in a genuinely sweet and caring tone, which Kakashi, Sakura, and even Sasuke were surprised at the tone of her voice, one that they've never heard from the redhead. Tora calmed in the redhead's arms and began to purr and lean into the hand that was petting her. Kakashi looked upon the scene with a slight shock. Tora was an infamous cat within the Konoha shinobi forces. A cat that can never be tamed and was a good exercise in teamwork for newly minted genins. Why are people so concerned with the cat? It was easy to catch, Naruto said offhandedly. Kakashi merely smiled while Sakura and Sasuke sneered at the girl. Alright, Team 7, we report in, stated Kakashi to his team. Team 7 followed their Jonin sensei for a few minutes until they stood in front of Iruka and the Hokage along with several chunin who manned the mission desk. All those present had shocked faces that were directed at Naruto as she slowly nuzzled against the purring cat in her hands. How? Iruka said in shock. Naruto merely shrugged her shoulders. Team 7 reporting in, the silver-haired Jonin stated. After a few seconds of silence, those present nodded slowly. The doors of the room suddenly barged open and a particularly fat and pristine-dressed woman sauntered through the double wooden doors. The woman's eyes immediately lit up at seeing her beloved cat in the arms of a red-headed girl. Tora! The woman screamed. The cat immediately hissed at the call of his name and the voice of his owner. The cat tried to quickly nuzzle further into Naruto's arms in search of safety. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the cat, then looked at the woman. Tora's owner immediately froze at the cold glare that was being sent her way. After a few seconds, the woman was about to berate the young girl until the glare of her blue eyes turned red with a slit in each pupil. "So, you're Tora's owner." Naruto merely stated the obvious. "The impression I get from Tora is that you're not a very good owner." The woman's eyes widened with shock and disdain at the way the girl addressed her. "Why you inso?" "You will shut up and listen to me," interrupted Naruto coldly. "You will treat Tora with respect and great care. If I find out that have not heeded my words, I will personally find you and I'll let you guess what I will do. Do you understand, woman?" The noble immediately nodded her head furiously. Tora jumped out of Naruto's arms and made its way towards the woman. The noble picked up Tora with caution and great care and slowly backed her way out of the mission room. "You shouldn't have talked to her that way, Naruto," Kakashi said coldly as he immediately moved to reprimand his student but was stopped by the slight killing intent that was suddenly directed at him by the third Hokage. The man looked at the silver-haired Jonin with narrowed eyes. Kakashi immediately stopped in his tracks and stood straight as an arrow. Naruto merely smirked coldly at her sensei. "Now that you have completed your Tora retrieval mission, will you be wanting another D-rank mission?" asked Iruka. His words had an immediate effect on two of Team 7's members. Sakura blanched at the thought of doing another D-ranked mission and Sasuke quickly opened his mouth and shouted his disdain. "No. We've done enough D-ranked missions for the past month. I am an Uchiha and Shinobi of the Year. I deserve better missions than lowly D-ranked ones." Iruka frowned. "You barely graduated the academy a month ago and you're demanding higher-ranked missions? That's a good way to get killed. As I stated, you have barely graduated from the academy." Sasuke was about to shout at his former instructor until the Hokage spoke with a tone of authority. "Shut your mouth, Genin." Hiruzen emphasized the rank of the Uchiha. Sasuke glared at the old man. Hiruzen simply ignored the glare for now and turned towards Kakashi. "Do you think your team is ready for a C-rank mission?" Kakashi thought for several moments in his head before he nodded. "I do, Hokage-sama. Teamwork is still a question but I do think they're ready for a C rank." Hiruzen looked at the Jonin for several seconds before nodding. "Shinji, let in the bridge builder," said Hiruzen at a Chunin who stood by the door. The man nodded and quickly went to find this said bridge builder. An old man wearing glasses walked into the room with narrowed eyes. He appraised the four members of Team 7 with calculating eyes before he let out a snort. "Am I to be guarded by 3 kids and a man with 1 eye? Tazuna-san, I assure you that Team 7 will be an adequate team for this mission," Iruka said, suppressing his protest at the thought of newly graduated Genin getting a C-ranked mission. Tazuna merely huffed. "Pinky there looks like a twig and looks like she'll break easily. Duck Butt looks like he'll kill me instead of protecting me, and Habanero over there looks like she'll kill her team instead of me," Tazuna said with a small smile. "Oh well. I guess this is what I get. I'll wait by the gate." Tazuna quickly left as he heard the Uchiha scream obscenities at him. Naruto merely stared at the spot where the old man was standing. She didn't disagree with his assessment of Team 7, he was quite spot on actually, but she didn't feel the need to correct the old man. "Hokage-sama, I must express my great concern over the fact that a 1-month-old genie team is getting their first C rank," Iruka stated with a frown. Hiruzen merely looked at the man and shook his head. "Do not worry, Iruka. I believe they're ready for it," replied Hiruzen quite cryptically. Iruka was going to try again but stopped himself short of it and merely nodded. He had to trust his Hokage on a matter such as this despite his great concern. "Team 7. This will be your first official C rank. You are to escort and guard the bridge builder known as Tazuna to Wave Country. Should we be expecting anything, Hokage-sama?" asked Kakashi. Hiruzen shook his head. "No, a simple escort mission." "Quite harmless," finished the old man. "Iruka," he then added. Iruka rubbed the back of his neck with an embarrassed smile. "All right, Team 7, you are dismissed and I will await your report once you make it back." Kakashi along with Team 7 nodded and quickly left. Once outside, Kakashi turned to his Genin team. "Meet me at the Konoha Gate in 2 hours, Kakashi ordered right before he disappeared in a puff of smoke. Sasuke huffed as he walked away while Sakura waved her hand in front of her face while she coughed at the smoke that Kakashi produced. Sakura eyed Naruto with a frown and quickly followed Sasuke. Naruto shook her head in disdain. A fangirl for life it seems, thought Naruto as she watched the pink-haired girl run toward Sasuke as she shouted at him to slow down. Naruto let out a sigh and made her way towards Ichiraku ramen stand that she frequented quite a bit when she was younger, not so much nowadays. She frowned at that thought. That certain night certainly changed what and who she visited. Maybe she should visit that old man and his daughter more often. A thought she'd ponder on some more on her way to the infamous ramen stand. After a few minutes of walking and ignoring the several villagers who gave her sneers, she finally walked into the small ramen stand and was instantly met by the smell of delicious ramen. The smell immediately triggered several memories from her years ago when she was a happy child that didn't know of the nefarious feelings that most of the entire village held of her. She was grateful that the small shop wasn't occupied by anyone else. Naruto quietly took a seat and was immediately greeted by a surprised old man. The man had his mouth slightly open in shock along with his wide eyes. "And Naruto," the man whispered. Naruto merely nodded, and as she didn't look the man in the eye, she didn't know why she was nervous and couldn't explain it. I'm surprised to see you, Naruto." "Tucci-san, it's been a while," replied Naruto. "That it has," Tucci said with a smile making its way onto his face. "Two bowls?" Before Naruto could reply, a woman exited the kitchen as she wiped her hands with a white cloth. "Who is it, Tu-san?" she asked before her eyes went wide at the red-headed girl that was currently seated in her father's shop. The white cloth fell from her hands as she stood there in shock. "Naruto?" whispered Ayame in the same shocked tone that her father had seconds before. "Hello, Ayame," Naruto responded, with a little bit of emotion attached to her words, a rarity for her nowadays. "Naruto, you're finally back?" asked Ayame curiously. I guess I am. Yes. Two bowls, Naruto?" Tucci asked as he butted into the conversation with a grandfatherly smile that she remembered. Naruto nodded a bit shyly. "Why are you acting this way now?" a voice in her head asked. Naruto groaned internally. She had forgotten about the damned nine-tailed fox that she was the jailer of. She hadn't made herself known for quite some time. She'd rather not deal with the nine-tailed fox at the moment and shut the feminine voice out of her head. Kurama merely snickered and went back to her usual napping self. "Yes, Tucci-san, two bowls," Naruto confirmed. I intend to visit you two more often. I apologize for not coming in the past several years. Something happened to me and I." "Shish, Naruto. It's all right. We get it," Ayame whispered lovingly, a knowing look in her eyes. Naruto merely nodded quickly and folded her hands on the wooden table. Ayame had heard about what happened to the girl from several shinobi that had eaten at Ichiraku's. Some of them were happy that the demon finally got what was coming to her. That line of thought was quickly squashed by herself and her father as her father kicked those shinobi out while at the same time Ayame threatened them with a metal pan. Naruto silently waited as old man Tucci silently made her ordered ramen. She watched both father and daughter work at the craft that they've mastered. She liked the dynamic that both of them held. She almost wished she had something like that with someone. The sound of cloth being disturbed broke her out of her thoughts as the Ino Shika Cho team along with Asuma entered the small ramen shop. It looked like they had either just finished training or just finished a D-ranked mission. All four members of the team immediately took notice of the blood-red hair that sat at the left farthest seat. There was an uncomfortable silence until the only member that Naruto tolerated broke the silence. "Naruto, hey," Shikamaru greeted as he rubbed the back of his neck. Ino, Choji, and Asuma all nodded at the girl as a greeting. Shikamaru sat apart from his team and took the seat next to the redhead. "How have you been since graduating?" he asked. "The same," replied Naruto. Shikamaru stared at the girl for a few seconds then nodded. Shikamaru knew of Naruto's story. Hell, most if not all the clans knew of what happened to the girl when she was young. The Nara clan heir was horrified and shocked that Konoha shinobi committed such a crime against one of their own along with all the abuse the girl suffered ever since she was born. He put on a face of indifference in public, but in private, he wept for the girl. No child should have gone through what she went through, and after Naruto returned to the academy after her incident, Shikamaru wanted to get to know the girl. Under all that new coldness there had to be a sad crying girl. Right? Unfortunately, Shikamaru never got that many chances to get to know Naruto, but he did talk to her when the opportunity arose. "And your team?" Naruto scoffed at the mention of her so-called team. You should already know the answer to that question, Shikamaru. Shikamaru hummed. I guess I do. Are you on your way to a D rank? C rank, Naruto corrected. Shikamaru raised his eyebrows in interest. C rank. That quick? Whispered Shikamaru, but then shrugged his shoulders. Makes sense. You are the strongest of us. This time, Naruto was the one to raise her eyes in interest but then narrowed her eyes in suspicion. And how do you know this? I'm not stupid, Naruto, replied Shikamaru as he narrowed his own eyes. That you are not. I wondered when you would figure it out. How much do you know? I know about your bloodline, Shikamaru whispered. Let me guess, it was mentioned in council meetings? Shikamaru nodded. My father was talking about it when some of the Nara higher-ups and I happened to hear about it. I don't think most of the general public knows. Probably the shinobi forces do though. I expected nothing less from that wretched council, sneered Naruto. Shikamaru once again raised his eyebrows at her statement, but he understood her sentiments. His father didn't particularly like either the shinobi or the civilian councils. What kind of C-rank mission are you going on? Asked Shikamaru as he swiftly changed the subject. Escorting some old man to Wave Country. Should be a relatively easy mission. What do you mean should? Well, Shikamaru, you never know what's going to happen when you're on a mission. Anything goes. You are quite vocal with the young Nara, Naruto. Naruto nodded inside her mind. He seems to be different than the others. He's lazy but he's a genius and nothing gets past him. A potential ally. Maybe. We'll wait and see. I agree, Shikamaru nodded. He turned his head towards the noise behind him and saw his team leaving. Well, this is where I leave you. We should hang out more, Naruto. Naruto nodded as she watched the Nara heir and his teammates leave the ramen stand. 2 bowls of ramen entered her vision as Ayame placed both bowls down in front of the redhead. Here you go, Naruto. Enjoy. Ayame beamed at the young girl as Naruto split her chopsticks and dug in modestly. Naruto sat there as she ate the ramen that she loved in her youth. The taste was still the same as more memories filled her head. 2 hours later, Naruto let out a rare genuine smile as she stacked the 2 ramen. Ayame caught the smile and smiled at herself. She hadn't seen that smile for a few years and was glad that she and her father were able to return that smile back to the young girl. Tucci grabbed the bowls and made his way to the sink while Ayame leaned upon the wooden table. Come more often, Naruto. To-san and I miss you. Naruto smiled and nodded. I will, Ayame. I promise. The redhead waved at the father-daughter pair as she left the small ramen shop. She didn't lie, she was going to come to the shop more often. Hiruzen has suggested for her to open up more, so she guessed she could check that off of the list of things Hiruzen wants her to do. Naruto made her way towards the Konoha gate. She didn't really need to gather up any supplies since she kept most of what she needed on her person anyways. She walked through the village as she once again ignored the various stares that garnered her. When she was younger, those stares haunted her dreams. She had suspicions but no one of authority would confirm them. Eventually, shortly after her incident, the fox finally contacted her. She now knew why the village hated her, and by that time, she didn't care one bit. If Naruto was being honest with herself, she should have hated that damn fox with everything she had, but she was numb. After a few weeks after her incident, she grew to forgive the fox. The fox had kept her alive during all those attacks despite how much she wanted to die in those very moments, and while she also should have hated the fox for that, she didn't. She was actually glad that the fox had kept her alive. That meant that she would be able to get revenge on the various people that wronged her throughout her life, before birth, and after. As she made her way towards the gate, her mind went towards her team and the mission they were assigned. As much as she hated that damned Uchiha, she couldn't deny that besides herself, he was the most skilled shinobi out of the graduating class. Sakura on the other hand. She didn't even know how she even managed to graduate. Naruto knew it was almost 100% based on her knowledge of being a kunoichi but not actual skill. Naruto was half expecting that the pink-haired girl would die during the mission. The giant gate of Konoha filled her view, and by the gate, she saw Team 7. Both Sasuke and Sakura had packs on their backs. Her footsteps interrupted whatever conversation they were having as the both of them turned to stare at the redhead. You're late. Sakura shouted almost immediately. Naruto sighed and stared at the girl unnervingly. If you knew anything about Hitaki Kakashi, you would know that he has a chronic problem with always being late. As if the Kakashi heard her say that, The silver-haired appeared in a puff of smoke. The man eyed his 3 students with an eye smile as if he somehow knew what they were talking about. His eye smile quickly left and his gaze turned serious. Ready? There, Jonin-sensei asked. Both Sasuke and Sakura nodded while Naruto ignored the man. Kakashi probably already knew what she did after Tora, she wouldn't be surprised if he did. Good. This will be our first C-rank mission. I don't expect anything to happen to my dear Genin, but this is the shinobi world, so be alert, Kakashi stated. This time though, Naruto nodded along with her team. Team 7 was interrupted by the old man they met back in the mission room approaching them. Team 7, right? Let's get going. Getting to Wave Country as fast as I can is probably for the best, the man said as he took out a bottle and took a swig of it. Sakura looked like she was about to berate the man. Naruto merely smirked at the old man and walked past the big gate of Konoha. The end. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next part.